Hi, everyone. I'm Steven Sigman.
And I'm Mike Massinio.
And this is the weekly movie throwdown, a discussion show where each week we dig into a film that fits into our overall monthly theme. This is the new month, so we're starting a new theme. It's the second week of a month. We were off last week, unforeseen circumstances where I had to say goodbye to my dear cat Pinky, but we were not able to record an episode. However, the next 3 episodes are going to be awesome, and we're starting this week with Sorcerer because we're looking at physical media all month, which is something I'm passionate about. Mike, I know you have a bit of a collection too, so we're gonna really dig into it. Before we do, though, as always, let's talk about a little industry news.
Yeah, this news cycle here is mostly just about technical stuff because what we're seeing is a lot of announcements of consolidation and all these tech movements, I guess we'll say. So the big thing this week is Disney announcing that Hulu is basically going away. Maybe I care about this more than most because it personally affects me. Like, I have Hulu with live TV and I'm confused as to what's going to happen next year. Hulu's going away. It's getting rolled into Disney Plus, but live TV is moving to Fubo and that'll be its own thing. Like, I genuinely don't understand what the hell's going on and don't quite know how I'm going to be watching TV next year. But that is a thing that's happening that I'm trying to pay attention to. So there's that.
Yeah, I saw that Hulu is going to be in like the international section of Disney Plus for some reason.
Yeah, I really am trying to get a handle on what exactly is happening, but I'm just going to wake up in 2026, turn the TV on and see what happens because I don't really know. See if I can find my shows, but that's where we are right now.
I didn't know about the live TV thing. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is being held separately because they have a separate deal with Fubo. And so Fubo, I think, will be running the live TV part, and then that's a separate app, so that won't technically be rolled into Disney Plus. And I got that far, and then my head started hurting, and I stopped reading it. And I'm like, I'm just going to roll the dice and see what happens because I don't quite understand what they're doing.
And people wonder why, streaming services struggle, and it's because things like this happen.
Yeah, right, exactly. And Paramount, obviously, that deal went through, and now the guy that's running it, the Ellison's son.
Ellison. Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously they're big on tech and they're talking about how they're going to revamp Paramount Plus and change a lot of things. I don't know what the hell that means either, but I don't expect Paramount Plus to look the same next year either. So I don't know. And then on a side note, Roku just announced a new streaming service called Howdy, which that was fun. So I decided to look at it, and it's $2.99 a month, ad free, and it's just a bunch of stuff like some movies. I saw American Psycho was on it, like just random movies. But the ad free thing is intriguing for only $3 a month. So I think they're trying to kind of, I don't know what they're trying to do, trying to find somebody, but who the hell's going to find Howdy in a sea of millions of apps? But the idea of only paying $3 a month and getting ad-free movies is intriguing because I have to say, watching Hulu and getting the ad breaks, even though they're small, like I just find that frustrating. There's only so many ads about eczema that I can watch before I want to throw myself out of a window. So I can't. Yeah. I'm struggling with that. So $3 a month for ad-free movies is starting to look pretty good to me.
Well, enjoy that because, the first one's free, right? You're going to pay $3 a month for like 6 months. And then, there's a commercial free tier for $8 or you pay $6 now with commercials.
Well, that's part of why I feel like I should get in while the getting is good. And then I could just jump off when they change it inevitably. But for now, that is a pretty good deal. I'm not going to lie. Of course, it depends on what movies are on there. But I saw American Psycho and Reservoir Dogs, which that's not bad.
Doesn't Roku have original programming too?
They do. They have the Roku channel, which is separate. Right. And that's the thing where they have original programming, but that has ads. This is not that. It's a separate thing.
Oh, okay.
Just to make sure we're all as confused as possible. So, yeah.
I feel like we could make money if we designed a flow chart of some kind that explains all of these streaming services and turned it into like a poster or something that we could sell. because it's confusing.
There are worse ideas. I mean, I've actually thought about this before, not necessarily the flowchart thing, but it has crossed my mind more than once that I miss the TV guide. And yes, I'm aging myself in a major way, but just remember opening up a TV guide and being like, oh, on this night at this time on this channel, this is
Yep.
going to be on. And that was helpful. Now
Yeah.
it's just very hard to know what is on when, where, or why. Because I don't know if you saw this. Also, one of the things in the whole Disney thing is that ESPN has gone crazy. They've
Yeah.
technically merged with the NFL almost. The NFL is now a 10% ownership stake of ESPN, which I mean, that's going to be intriguing to see how ESPN covers the NFL going forward since they partially own it. But that's neither
Yeah.
here nor there. They actually bought the Prima events for wrestling as well. That's no longer going to be on Peacock, so they have that, which I'm sure they're going to put on the app, which you're going to have to pay $30 a month for. We'll put a pin in that because I don't know where that's going. But I just read that ESPN is getting 2 Super Bowls.
Oh,
in the future, and not that far into the future. And that's another thing that I think we'll have to see where that plays out, because is it going to still be on ABC? I can't imagine they would put it on an app that would be hard to access because so many people watch it. So I don't know if that means anything different, but it specifically said not ABC, where it's always been. I mean, obviously Disney owns that too, but ESPN specifically. And so we'll have to see what that means. But yeah, could you imagine the Super Bowl like being on a paywall, but on an app behind a paywall? That would be crazy.
Yeah, that is insane. I think if I did see that Peacock lost the wrestling, and that could be a death knell for them, because I heard on The Town this week that of all of the streaming services, they're the only one that's local to America. They don't have like an international programming, or like the app isn't international. It's America only. And because of that, they're the only one that's actually losing money. And so if they lose wrestling, which I would imagine is like a big draw for subscribers, what's left? Like Poker Face?
I mean, they already lost Murder, She Wrote. I don't know if you saw that, but Murder, She Wrote went off the streaming app a few months ago. So, I mean, that's a huge blow right there. But other than that, it's like Columbo is the most important thing on Peacock as far as I'm concerned. So,
oh my God.
It's a little...
I'm seeing.
Did I just make myself seem like I'm
100,
like 105 years old? Yeah, those are my 2 favorite things on Peacock. So,
it makes sense that it's struggling.
I enjoy my murder shows. Me and everybody who's over 80. That's what we enjoy.
Wow, that's yeah. Did you have any other news stories that you wanted to mention?
No, that was it. Now that I just admitted that Murder, She Wrote is my favorite show, I'm going to just stop now. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Paramount and David Ellison, and they finally closed this deal after all of this hoopla around it, and they just landed their first package like hours after the deal was done, and it's a big deal because it is the first thing that Dana Goldberg and Josh Greenstein have purchased. They replaced Brian Robbins as a CEO. And the package is something called High Side, which is directed by James Mangold and stars Timothée Chalamet. So this is kind of a big deal, and it sort of bodes well for them going forward, because their slate isn't great. I mean, they have a lot of properties like Top Gun and Gladiator and a couple other things, but they had Smurfs a few weeks ago, and just a lot of things that are either mid-level or just not doing well. But this thing with Chalamet and Mangold looks pretty good. It's going to be produced by Peter Chernin and David Reddy, who at least Chernin worked with James Mangold before. And get this story. Like, it's written by Jamie Oliveira, who's someone I don't know, but they wrote an unpublished story and are adapting the screenplay. But the write-up for it says it's heat meets hell or high water, mixed in with one of those Bruce Springsteen songs about tragic brother relationships. So it almost feels like a Taylor Sheridan film, which makes sense going to Paramount. But Chalamet plays a former MotoGP racer haunted by a career-ending crash and a family legacy of abandonment. He's running a garage and tending to his drug-addled father. When dad dies, he's drawn back into the world of high-speed risks and extreme danger. When his estranged brother, already being pursued by the FBI, recruits him for a series of bank robberies on super bikes. So it sounds like both really intriguing and super corny at the same time to me, but I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. I mean, Chalamet and Mangold
I mean, that review is slightly suspect because I really think Springsteen only wrote one song about brothers, which was State Trooper. He wrote most of his songs about his father. So it's a little suspect out of the gate. Not to get Springsteen nerdy on you, but that's the only song I can think of off the top of my head that he wrote specifically about brothers. Well, he mentions brother, but he means that more like a friend than actual brothers.
Yeah, but we need that. We need that take on it to know how legitimate this is. So
yeah, so it's already a little bit suspect.
Well, now I'm not as interested.
Total side note about Chalamet, by the way. I wasn't even going to bring this up, but since you brought up Chalamet, my son told me that he read somewhere, and I always ask him where he finds this stuff out because it's important to know where you're getting this from, that supposedly Chalamet is in the running to play James Bond. Now, take that with a huge grain of salt coming from my son, but he said he read it like somewhere in a magazine. I will say, and if this comes back to bite me, fine. I'm going on the record 100% that Chalamet will not be James Bond. No. I feel more than firm in that, especially because Bond is not going to be American. That's just the main reason. Right. Like, I know Amazon bought it, but I don't think they're going to go that route. That's just an unwritten rule that they will not let Bond be American. And if Bond's going to be American, I doubt it's going to be Chalamet. So,
you don't think Timmy can do a British accent? He wants to be Michael Jordan.
He definitely could. He could do the British accent. I just don't believe he holds the. I don't think you think that Chalamet is gonna break your neck in an alley. I just don't really see it. He doesn't like project that menace that you kind of need to have Bond, in my opinion. But again, it has nothing to do with that. I think he's a good actor. It's not that I don't think he could do it, honestly. It's not that I don't think he could play the part. I just don't think they're going to go with an American. That's why I feel really firm in thinking that it's not going to be him.
I don't know, though. Denis Villeneuve is directing, and they kind of have a thing now with the Dune episodes behind them.
That may be why the rumor popped up, but I still don't believe it.
I would think, well, I guess I'm sort of changing calling myself out on this, but I was going to say, I would think the commitment of probably multiple films that you would be required to play Bond, but he did it with Dune. So maybe he's into that.
But that's the thing, because he's already doing Dune. You think he's going to want to commit to two giant franchises? That's like, Cameron committing to Avatar. And he basically said, I actually just read this recently. He said that he committed to Avatar. He feels okay with basically giving the rest of his career to Avatar because he feels like those movies have a message that matters, that he thinks that it can affect something in the bigger picture. And he can have that opinion. That's fair. But that's why he feels justified in doing it. And that's okay. But so you really think that Chalamet, at the point he's at now, is going to want to saddle himself with two franchises where that's basically all he's going to have time to do? I can't see that either.
That's like a Marvel commitment, 10 years. Yeah. And a lot of people come out now and say, that Marvel commitment is just too much and they've missed a lot of opportunities to do other things. So yeah, maybe James Bond would be the same way. All right. Well, that's pretty much all we have for news this week. So let's move on. Very exciting. Let's talk about Sorcerer. So this kicks off Physical Media Appreciation Month for us, which is something that I pitched because I, like a lot of film bros, really invest in collecting physical media. And I wanted to do Sorcerer because a new edition just came out from Criterion. And this was kind of long awaited, and we'll get into speculation as to why it took so long. But it's, this is a great example of why physical media is so excellent. I mean, there are special features on this new Criterion edition that you might be able to collect online if you hunt and peck. And I found pretty much most of them, except for a few. But it's just, you know, to have all of that in one place, and as a designer, for me to have like this physical artifact of this film in particular is really really cool. So
I'm going
I'm
to throw
excited to
my
talk about it.
I was going to throw my 2 cents about physical media as well, even though this was something that you pitched. But I'm 100% behind it because I went through a period where I was buying a lot of DVDs. Now, I don't buy as many as I used to, and I've sold a few here and there,
Mhm.
but there's some I definitely regret selling. And as we get older, we all thought that the streaming era would be liberating for all of us, but what we're finding is that it gets harder and harder to find the movies that you want to see. And there's all these little caveats to it, whether it's commercials, whether it's hidden in some app you don't have, or all these roadblocks that come up where I find myself basically getting most of the movies that I watch from the library on DVD
Hmm.
anyway. And it's true that there is just something to be said for a really good collection and a movie with some really nice features and all of that in one place where you can really dive into it, where you can just put in the DVD and watch all of this stuff connected to a movie rather than searching for it online, spending all this time going down rabbit holes. But again, it's about owning something that you love. And I've been saying this to actually my own son is when I say, when he tells me there's a movie that he really loves, like Creed. I'm like, if you love it, you might as well own it because there's no guarantee where it's going to be on a month to month basis, or especially even a year from now. So I've come back around to feeling like the things that you love are probably worth owning.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have, and it doesn't stop with movies. I mean, you see people collecting vinyl now a lot more than they were 20 years ago. VHS is making a pretty big comeback.
That's a bridge too far for me.
Well, what's interesting is, even new films, and this kind of speaks to one of the things I love about collecting films is that there are a lot of independent distributors now, like Criterion, places like Umbrella in Australia, and Shout Factory, and all of these places, Arrow Video in the UK. And there's a real art to making these cases and then like restoring the film. And even with VHS, there are a lot of artists now because it's very cheap to make VHS, I guess. They will do all of this really cool cover art and then like physically produce VHS tapes to go inside of these cases that they made. And it's really more about like kind of the nostalgia of the film or like the love of a current film. Uh, it's more about the artwork than that film on VHS, I think. But there's such a nostalgia for VHS too because it was kind of like the first thing, right? Like we had laser discs, but uh, and Betamax. Did you remember Betamax or a Laserdisc player?
Had a Laserdisc player, not Betamax. I mean, Betamax disappeared because VHS basically won that war.
Yeah,
But there were always people
right,
that said Betamax was better. But we were a VHS family, and
right.
then we got into Laserdisc. And Laserdisc, interestingly enough, is still the only place that you can own the original versions of Star Wars. Like if
Really?
you have the laser discs of this original Star Wars trilogy, and I know this because my brother has it, that's the last place the original versions still technically exist. The DVD switched over to the versions that Lucas wants everyone to see that he digitized
Right.
and changed, but the laser disc is the original cut.
Wow, that must be so valuable.
I don't know.
And
I
that's
don't
the
own it,
other
so
thing.
it doesn't do anything for me. My brother has it, so
But the other thing with physical media these days is that some of them are valuable like that, like uh, these smaller runs that these independent distributors do of something, they sell out very quickly and then the price shoots up. There was, you'll appreciate this, like Daylight, the Stallone film, that came out maybe 6 months ago, but there was some kind of, according to the distributor, some kind of production error on it. So they shipped maybe like 20 of them and then they pulled them all off the shelves. So there are 20 versions of this original Daylight out there that are going for hundreds of dollars on eBay. And there, it's so much like records. Like records used to be like that too. Like there would be some sort of like imperfection or just some limited edition. And basically everything's limited edition now if it doesn't come from a studio. And that's what's cool
Right.
about it. And at the top of it is Criterion, I think, doing like amazing restorations. They have, I mean, they started back with laser discs, so they really have a legacy of embracing world cinema, anything from like the best of cinema to the worst of it, and just kind of giving it a home and putting a lot of care into it equally, whether it's Breathless or it's Repo Man. So I that's a big part of why I collect. And, I have a modest collection of like 200 films right now. And there are people who have 10,000 films. And like Tracy Letts, the actor and writer, he is famous for having over like 15,000 Blu-rays and a theater that in his house. And just, it's incredible. So we're dipping into that this month with this sort of fandom and obsession around physical media, and starting with Sorcerer. Uh, the Criterion edition, which I'm holding right now, has a 4K restoration. And that's something that we're seeing more of as the televisions get better, as the projections in movie theaters get better, higher resolution. And this is an HDR copy. It means it has a higher dynamic range. I'm going to get a little nerdy, sorry. But your lights are lighter, your blacks are darker. And what's cool about that in this version of Sorcerer is that this film is just so like tangible and textured. When you see it in the jungle, the rain, the dirt in the bar, you feel dirty, like you're in that bar, like it's so lived in. And all of that comes through on this Criterion edition, which is what you like, all you can ask for. So it's really amazing.
So this may be something we end up talking about in the big picture at the end of the month when we start wrapping this stuff up. But I do want to get your thoughts on all the 4K restorations and whether you think that everything should be restored, or if you think that some things, end up suffering by trying to brighten up a picture that wasn't actually filmed that way, and what has to be done to do it. But we'll kind of put a pin in that. But I actually do want to hear your thoughts, since you're definitely more into the 4K stuff, and you have a 4K TV and I don't, strangely enough. So sometimes I'm watching things in 4K and I find they look a little bit strange.
Well, yeah, I'll answer it now. I mean, I don't think that everything needs a 4K restoration. I think you're right that some things are better left the way they were. And there's actually a lot of debate over this Sorcerer restoration, where we'll get into the history of the physical media and home video aspect of it. But I think you said you watched it on Blu-ray, right?
Yeah.
So the Blu-ray came out, I believe, in 2013, because there was a whole battle over it. And that was overseen by William Friedkin. And it's sensational. And he was very much like a tinkerer with audio and visual, and to the point where it was kind of like a problem. And I alluded to earlier, like there was a reason this kind of this Sorcerer release came out so late. And some of the speculation is that because he couldn't oversee it, because he would go in and like edit the film when they were trying to restore it. This happened with The Exorcist, and that's a big problem. You're not getting the film that you're buying, but he was big on audio and making it like 5.1 Dolby. So this sounds amazing, and I know that the soundtrack is the same one that you heard on the Sorcerer Blu-ray,
Right.
but yeah, did we need this? I don't know. I mean, there's such a clamoring for Sorcerer that I think because it was so hard to come by for a while, and Criterion to me did a great job on it. And some people don't think the same, but it's kind of a fine line when you're restoring, because you're really at the mercy of whoever is doing the color timing, or what their preference is for. Like you see a lot of teal and blue and sort of like orange and changing the mood and whatever. But I think it's a case by case basis. And one thing that scares me is we've seen recently with 4K restorations of True Lies and The Abyss that the companies just threw them through an AI machine and let AI do all the restoration instead of going through it, you know,
I
by
can't
hand.
believe that the guy that made the Terminator would
I know,
allow that to happen to his
I know,
movies. I really can't. Like, I find
I
that
know.
stunning.
But they look like garbage. I mean, the backlash online is huge because it's AI. I mean, it looks like AI. It looks like people have weird hands and it's just completely lazy. And when you do something automated like that, you're losing all of that personal handwork that makes it so good.
Yeah, and let me get on a soapbox for 1 minute, but I do find that doubly offensive because if you're a person who is actually buying physical media, you're definitely a person who doesn't necessarily believe that in all this technology, so to speak. I'm not saying in that way where you're a luddite or something, but you have this nostalgia for not having things in streaming, not having things be tangible, and almost existing in the real world, so to speak.
Uh,
And so the last thing you would want is for your movie to become less realistic, to become almost more fantasy or unreality, I guess we'd say, by changing things and altering things by AI or any kind of digital technology. So I just think that's a strange choice to make as well, because the people who want to buy it on physical media, they want to see what the original movie was, warts and all. That's part of what's good about it.
yeah. And that is kind of a nice segue into Sorcerer because one of the things that's so great about this and the restoration enhances, like I said, is just the texture of it. And if you like you couldn't make this movie today the way they made it. And I think that's why it looks the way it does.
There's a
And
hundred
that's
reasons you couldn't make this movie today. We'll probably get into those as we go along.
yeah. But one of the main ones is like it's all shot on location and there's a lot of production around this. But almost nothing is shot on location anymore. So even if it's like the highest resolution camera, like Avatar is a great example. Not that I've ever seen one, but from like the pieces of them that I've seen, it looks beautiful, but it doesn't matter how 4K you make it. It's not going to feel real. And that's kind of one of the things, like you're saying, that you lose when a human being isn't overseeing a restoration like this. But yeah, I think, that's a great way to get into talking about like the actual film Sorcerer. So you hadn't seen this before, right?
I had not.
And what did you think?
I have a lot of thoughts about Sorcerer.
Good.
Um, so just so look, as someone that loves movies, as a movie nerd, so to speak, I really, really appreciate Sorcerer, and I can understand why it's come back around as things have become, as we've said, less real. As we've become, all our movies have started living in this unreality place. I can see why people are coming back to Sorcerer, which feels as real as a movie could possibly be, where you almost get malaria just from watching Sorcerer. Like that is how real it feels. And I get all of that. And so I was kind of drawn into it in that aspect, like just feeling like you're in this world. I mean, he's really in it. But as a regular casual moviegoer, I can also see why it failed. I mean, I can. It just feels like the ultimate uh example of hubris of a filmmaker. Like you can
Oh,
feel it. Like
100%.
here's the two things. You can feel the fear and the malaria and the ego all at once in watching Sorcerer. And that's what I
Yeah.
got from just watching it the first time. Like all that just rushed at me.
Yeah. That's I think William Friedkin would absolutely love hearing that. That's pretty amazing. Let me just explain what it's about before we dig into it too far, because I think the things you said about it, when you hear, what it's about, all of that stuff makes sense because it's kind of a strange story. But basically, four criminals from around the world end up in this sort of middle of nowhere Latin American village and they have no money. They can't make their way out. They need to buy passports to get out.
Right.
And what's happened is there's an American oil company that's come in and is basically using up all the resources in the area. They pay the people of the town sort of a very, very small wage. And these four men are some of those workers, but the wages are so low that they can't afford to ever save enough to get a passport and get out. So they're basically stuck there. And there, there's a lot of uh, comparisons to like purgatory, like they're in purgatory because they've committed these crimes and they can't get out of this place. They're sort of stuck waiting. And one of the oil wells is sabotaged. And so it explodes. And the only way they determine to cut off the flames is to blow it up. And this is similar to what happened in There Will Be Blood. There are a lot of other films that were influenced by Sorcerer that you can see as you go on. But the only way to blow it up is that the oil company has this very mishandled dynamite that has just sat unattended for a year. And because it's been like not rotated, I think the guy said, the nitroglycerin in it has become incredibly volatile.
It's leaking nitroglycerin.
It's leaking nitroglycerin, and like the slightest bump will just detonate all of it. And so in order to shut down this well, the oil company enlists 4 drivers to go on what they deem as basically a suicide mission to drive this explosive from one end of wherever they are to the other. It's 218 miles through just a brutal jungle. And by the way, I mean, you have to sort of like suspend reality a little bit because any one of the bumps they hit would have blown this stuff up instantly,
Well, I appreciate so we also have to mention this is technically a remake, even though Friedkin goes out of his way to say this is not a remake in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. That's another part of the hubris, by the way, which we'll get into. But it's a remake of a movie called Wages of Fear, a French movie from 1953. And I actually watched Wages of Fear as well because I wanted to see. It's good though that in Sorcerer, they show you that it's in sand to kind of keep it from bouncing around that much, which I do appreciate. They at least give you something to allow you to suspend disbelief, but by continuing the show to show that to you.
Yeah, they do show it shifting.
Yeah, and they don't really show that in Wages of Fear. Matter of fact, it just seems to be it's nitroglycerin itself, just in jugs. It seems like in the back of that truck. Wages of Fear would have been over in 5 minutes. The minute you started driving that truck, would have exploded. Like that would have been, it would have been like a cartoon. Like that would have been it. Yeah. But so at least Sorcerer does a better job of allowing you to suspend your disbelief.
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned Wages of Fear, and I'm really glad you watched it too, because it's nice to have that comparison. And Friedkin says it's not a remake, and the way he looks at it is that the Clouseau version of Wages of Fear and Sorcerer are both adaptations of the George Arnault book. So in that way, yeah, it's like two people just made two versions of this novel. And what's interesting is Friedkin went to Clouseau to get his blessing to make Sorcerer, and he had no idea why he was even coming to him and thought it was ridiculous. But Arnault, the author of the book, and Clouseau, the director of Wages of Fear, like hated each other. So Arnault had no love for the first screen adaptation, but he was cool with giving the rights to Friedkin to make it again. Maybe as a redemption for Wages of Fear, I don't know. But it's interesting. And there are quite a few differences between the two.
There's some differences, but I was actually surprised by the number of similarities, I have to say. Yeah. Like that's what made me laugh. Because like Friedkin's like, it's not a remake, it's not really, like, fine. But I mean, once you get into the trucks, the beats were much closer to each other than I expected, to be honest.
Yeah, that middle part, but everything around it is like Friedkin, master of the international prologue, has 30 minutes before you even get to the town. Whereas in Wages of Fear, it just opens in the town.
Right.
And then the end, the end is crazy in Wages of Fear. We're going to spoil a little bit here, but it's so comical that you
It
have to
is
mention it.
really comical. I really want to see the book and see if that's how it ended. It's like you
Yeah.
just risked your life and survived. You're like, I'm just gonna joyride in circles on a mountain. Like, what? Just drive straight and go home. Like, what's wrong with you? That's the
Yeah.
dumbest way to die I've ever seen.
It's, yeah. I mean, the Friedkin way is so much better
Actually
because,
loved the ending
yeah,
of Sorcerer. I have to say,
yeah.
and I don't know if we're gonna spoil it. We don't even have to. But the way Sorcerer ends, it is such a gut punch. Whereas in
Uh-huh.
Wages of Fear, it's completely telegraphed to you.
Yeah.
You can see what's coming, and you just think, well, if anyone deserved to die, it's this guy. And you don't even really care. Like, and it so ends very abruptly.
Yeah.
Wages of Fear is pretty crazy, but Sorcerer, yeah, it's such a gut punch the way that movie ends, and you don't even have to see it. And I just think yeah, that is really well done.
And I think it speaks to the overall theme that Friedkin was sort of leaning into in like a very cynical way, more so than Wages of Fear. Like Wages of Fear isn't as overt about it, but it's the idea of fate. And there's a lot of confusion around the title Sorcerer. And Friedkin says in his book that Sorcerer is like a wizard, like an evil wizard who
Come on.
sort of dictates,
He named it
hey,
after a Miles Davis album. We
that
know
too. Yeah.
this. That's the truth. Look, we can start getting into all the mistakes made with Sorcerer, and again, it's just part of it. It's a lot of it is ego,
Yeah.
and so there are just a lot of missteps that you made that you probably could have fixed if you weren't just so convinced of your greatness and your rightness that you probably could have fixed a few of these things, but honestly not really in the big picture, because as we know, there's one big thing that is the reason Sorcerer really failed,
Yeah.
and that is Star Wars.
Right. Yeah. So this plagued with trouble, this film. And what I was going to say is that one of the things about Sorcerer, the name, is that he believes it's like the wizard is just the arbiter of fate. And so fate is what catches up to you. Doesn't matter how many good deeds you do to redeem yourself. Fate is fate. And he likens it to the idea of like somebody stepping out of their house and just being taken away by a hurricane or a tornado or something. And like, you can't outrun that. Fate turns the corner before you do, he said. And that's kind of the point of the ending of Sorcerer is like, these guys are scoundrels basically
Right.
who commit crimes and end up where they do through fate, given this job. And at least the Jackie Scanlon, Roy Scheider character kind of redeems himself, but doesn't matter. Like
Kind
that's
of. But yeah, but Sorcerer is also the name of a truck, which is
right.
kind of also what it's named after. And if
Mhm.
you have to spend that much time explaining what the title is, you've kind of already failed. And that's the issue with here. The problem with Sorcerer is that the expectations of it and the preconceived ideas of it doomed it from the start, because what Friedkin fans were expecting after The Exorcist, and you have a movie called The Sorcerer after The Exorcist, you're expecting something that either leans supernatural or horror.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain segment of people that went in expecting that, and that is not what Sorcerer is in any way. It's a pretty straightforward, action movie, so to speak. And there's a lot of things, but if it's the crude way of saying, if it's anything, it's kind of an adventure movie with high tension. It's certainly not supernatural. So you've already annoyed the people who thought they were getting The Exorcist, and by giving them a title Sorcerer, you're kind of cluing them in. Then you have the average person that walks in, and they had to put a disclaimer that this wasn't a foreign movie because the first
Yeah.
30 minutes are not in English. So you sit
Right.
down and you're getting foreign languages for the first 25 minutes of the movie, and then those people walk out. So it's almost like you couldn't have set up a situation where you were going to alienate more people than the way they rolled out Sorcerer.
Well, I agree with you, but I also think there are some things at play where when when this was conceived, this was in the middle of New Hollywood, where something like this would have played a little better. And, there was like a realism and an authenticity to what these people were doing as directors in the early 70s. And I think because of his hubris and because of waiting so long, coming post
Right.
Jaws, I think, that's a blockbuster that's starting to play overseas, a foreign market, which, wasn't really a thing for American movies up until that point.
Yeah.
And so putting it out in 77 was like 4 years too
You're
late,
right.
I
I was gonna say
think.
that's the other part too. That this was supposed to be a small movie. It ends up the budget explodes, but the amount of time it takes just it prolongs, and so you end up with a movie that probably could have come out in 75 that might have been received in a certain way, comes out in 77, and the door is basically closed. But the crazy part is Star Wars comes out the week before Sorcerer. And Star Wars is a phenomenon like no one was expecting or had seen. So people are obsessed with Star Wars. And so you take Star Wars out of these theaters, because remember at the time in the 70s, a lot of movie theaters were one screen.
Yep.
So you remove Star Wars, you put in Sorcerer, which after seeing Star Wars, people might think is a science fiction movie. It could be something else, a fantasy movie. They go in and they get this, and it's just rejected wholesale. Like Star Wars, changed what the expectations of cinema were almost overnight. And
Yeah.
so it's just that Sorcerer ends up being maybe 2 years too late to catch the audience that it needed, and it just dies a quick death.
It feels to me like things we see now, like in, I don't know, 2014 or 2015 or something, you have an auteur who makes a film, but it's just like usurped by Marvel. And there's no digging out of that hole that Marvel puts you in, because that's an international success. And Star Wars was kind of like right at the beginning of that.
Right.
It's almost like the first comic book movie in a way.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's just bad luck for Friedkin.
But again, but Friedkin as well, because of his own ego, takes a movie that should have cost $3 million and the budget balloons to $22 million, which makes it a movie that has to make Star Wars / Marvel money to be considered a success. So you've already shot yourself in the foot, where if you'd have made it for $3 million, you might have seen some slight success for this movie. But because he was obsessed with the realism, doing it on location, there are people that say that part of the reason he filmed this on location in Latin America is because he was obsessed with Francis Ford Coppola as well. It kind of felt like Coppola was his competition. So because Coppola went to the jungles to film Apocalypse Now, he's like, well, I could do that. And so he goes to Latin America, films this on location, and the budget just explodes. But somehow Coppola was able to save himself, and Friedkin really didn't.
And that's the thing, is like they're both these directors who, I mean, I know Apocalypse Now was a success, but these were guys who were just full of themselves in the early 70s after so much success, and became kind of like pains in the ass to the studios.
Right.
And that wasn't flying anymore. And Friedkin in particular, right? From what I gather, is like everything he did was just like there's, this was put out through Universal, but the budget ballooned so much that they had to bring Paramount on board. And Paramount's parent company was Gulf and Western, which had a ton of holdings in the Dominican Republic.
Right. And it's an oil company, by the way, Gulf and Western, just to clarify.
Right. And so it's meta in the film that the oil company is basically like stripping the land from these indigenous people, causing poverty, and destroying the environment. But Friedkin is nothing if not an activist, and kind of like someone who's going to throw up the middle finger. So there's a scene where the oil company executive is kind of telling the on the ground guy like what they have to do to take care of this exploded, and this oil well was sabotaged by locals. And that kind of speaks to how they feel about the oil company coming in and destroying the land. And there's the president wanted to seem liberal, even though he was backing this oil company to make money. So he couldn't come in and like protect the oil company. So it's completely corrupt. But there's a scene where there's this conversation about what needs to happen. And in the back of the desk is this portrait, or this photo of like the board of the oil company, but it's actually the board of directors for Gulf and Western. That's what Friedkin put in there as kind of like a screw you to them, which is weird because when they came on board, because they basically own the Dominican Republic, they told him, whatever you need, Billy, like you film there and we got you. But I think he maybe took that olive branch a little too far, obviously.
So I wanted to bring this up. I guess now's as good a time as any to talk about this because we're discussing Friedkin's inability to not put his finger in the eye of people. So around this period of time, this late 70s period, again, movies were changing after Star Wars, the expectations of the audience. But, all of the people that we consider to be like the seminal film directors of the 70s all had flops around this same period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So Sorcerer didn't do well. Scorsese put out New York, New York. He decided he wanted to make a musical. He makes a musical, which is a huge disaster. Again, hubris. And and Coppola ends up escaping with Apocalypse Now, amazingly enough. It ends up being a success.
Yeah.
So what does he do? He ends up tripling down by starting his own studio and doing One from the Heart, which was supposed to be a really small movie. That budget explodes because he decides to change how movies are made. That's a huge disaster. And he ends up basically bankrupting himself and his entire studio. That's a really sad story if people want to go look into that. Yeah. But, they all are kind of done in by their own ego and they all fail miserably. Even Spielberg, interestingly enough, in this period of time, 79 puts out 1941, which is kind of the only film in his entire catalog which is not considered a success. But side note, even that movie technically was successful because the budget was small and it made more money than it cost, but it's considered a flop for him. All those other ones were huge financial disasters. So everyone tries to bounce back from the failures that they had. And this is something I was becoming obsessed with, that everyone else does bounce back except Friedkin. Friedkin never really gets back to the point that he was coming off of French Connection in The Exorcist. And he ends up becoming just a guy. I don't even know how to explain it. I mean, he just becomes not another director because he's still making decent work. I mean, To Live and Die in LA is a really good movie, but just another director in a way. I mean, by the time the 90s roll around, I mean, he makes Blue Chips. He's making just movies you feel like anybody could make. Whereas Coppola and Scorsese, I mean, they have to work hard to get back to some place of where they think they should be, but they do crawl all the way back, and Friedkin never does. And I think that part of the reason for that is I just think that Friedkin must have burned so many bridges. I think people just didn't want to give him money anymore. They don't want to deal with the shit. And that it's the only reason I can think of, because Coppola is probably as annoying to work with as anybody. And they still brought him back. So Friedkin must have just pissed off so many people in so many ways.
I think the thing that kind of did him in is after Sorcerer, he made something called The Brink's Job with Peter Falk, which was just almost like a comedy, I think, where it was kind of like for the people. But then he goes on to make something he's wanted to make for a while, which is Cruising with Al Pacino. And an incredibly controversial film that he really had to fight to get made. We should mention, too, that he had a 3-picture deal with Universal, and Sorcerer was the first one. And after that, they dropped him in no more deal.
Right.
So he kind of had to scrap and like find his way back, too. But I think because he made Cruising, that kind of showed that he wasn't a team player, even after Sorcerer was such a failure. And maybe that branded him as like box office poison, because it seems unlikely that when you come off of The French Connection in 1971, which won 5 Oscars, including Best Director for Friedkin, Best Picture, and then you go on to The Exorcist, which at the time was the 3rd highest grossing film ever. Those are 2 pictures that are going to get you so much clout in Hollywood that I would think that if you end up making a dud, you're going to get a second chance. But I think if you're Friedkin and you make a dud after all of your demands you might still maybe get a second chance. But then if you make Cruising, like you're done. And I think he just kept pushing and pushing until Hollywood was like, okay, we're done with you, dude.
Yeah, and I was looking at, what did everyone make after their flop, so to speak. So after New York, New York, Scorsese makes Raging Bull. And I think Raging Bull, again, is one of those movies that even I say, someone loves Scorsese, I think it's a movie you appreciate more than you love. It's a difficult movie to watch about a difficult person. But, I mean, it gets nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I mean, it's considered one of the best movies of the 80s. So it clearly, he kind of bounces back, although he sticks to his guns of making a difficult movie. But I think because the budget was low enough, he's able to make that work and ends up being successful. Coppola basically becomes a director for hire. His next movie is The Outsiders. So he basically takes any jobs he can get. And he's no longer, he realized he has to start all the way back at the bottom and become a director again instead of an auteur and work his way back up. And you know what the next movie was after 1941 that Spielberg made, which again proves why Spielberg is not them. And he's definitely more of a people's director than any of those guys ever were.
Was it Indiana or Temple of Doom?
It was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like after 1941, he makes Raiders of the Lost Ark. He decides, I'm all in on crowd pleasing. No more of this. Like we're going after it. So, but Friedkin, what does he do? His next movie is even after The Brinks Job, which is a fairly simple movie, but then he gets a little bit of clout back, and then he makes an even more difficult movie that is really, it's protested by the gay community because they think it's targeting them. Yeah. It's a movie that the average person isn't going to watch, but also Al Pacino, who was in it, was also unhappy with it because he said there were parts in it that they ended up cutting to try to please people, and he thought it didn't go far enough. So even he wasn't pleased with how it turned out. So it just ended up not working for anybody.
Right?
Yeah, that might have been the final nail in the coffin. Oh, there you go.
Well, yeah, they cut 10 minutes out. James Franco actually made a film called Interior Leather Bar that was the making of those 10 minutes that were cut out of Cruising. So I've never seen it. I have Cruising right here on 4K. I kind of want to watch this and then go watch those 10 minutes or that Franco film. But he's, Friedkin just, he can't do himself any favors because of the success of The French Connection and The Exorcist.
Right.
And what's interesting, we'll
call that, we have a phrase for this now. We'll call that Mickey Rooney syndrome.
Oh boy.
Mickey Rooney never stopped thinking that he was the biggest star in the world after the 40s. And I think Friedkin, in his mind, it was always 1973. And The Exorcist is the biggest movie in America. And that's just how he carried himself from here on out.
It's ironic for Mickey Rooney since he was so little. But the what if here is that after The Exorcist, it took Friedkin for a while to decide that he wanted to do Sorcerer. And one of the projects he was considering doing was something called The Devil's Triangle, which was a UFO film about the Bermuda Triangle. And get this cast: Steve McQueen, Charlton Heston, and Marlon Brando.
That is probably one of the greatest what ifs in Hollywood.
Yep.
Can you imagine if he made Sorcerer for the $3 million he wanted as the in-between movie and then was able to put out Devil's Triangle before Spielberg put out Close Encounters, which is basically why Devil's Triangle didn't get made. Because while he was trapped in the jungle trying to make Sorcerer, Spielberg makes Close Encounters of the Third Kind and steals his UFO thunder. But how could that movie not have been huge? Like that would have altered Spielberg's career. It would have altered Friedkin's career. I mean, that is a really, really fascinating what if.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why it didn't get made.
And even Sorcerer, Steve McQueen again was supposed to be in Sorcerer, which we know.
Yeah, that's one of the other things that, it was marketed poorly. Star Wars came out and Roy Scheider wasn't Steve McQueen, And
so the original cast of Sorcerer is Steve McQueen, Marcello Mastroianni, who was also a huge actor. You would have had a cast that would have been played internationally with big names, but because he got pissy with Steve McQueen, McQueen ends up dropping out again. And that's the one thing he copped to regretting. Like Friedkin, like of all the things I saw with him and all the interviews, like he refuses to give on it. Like he loves Sorcerer. He thinks it's unappreciated. Like wouldn't give an inch about the choices he made, but he did at least admit that not keeping Steve McQueen was a mistake.
And one of the big issues was this is something that's very different between Wages of Fear and Sorcerer is the kind of cantina area. There's a woman called Linda in Wages of Fear who has a fairly decent role.
Yeah.
She is kind of the love interest of the character Roy Scheider would play in Sorcerer. And McQueen wanted Ali MacGraw to be in that role in Sorcerer. He wanted Walton Green, the screenwriter, to write that part to be kind of meatier, and Ali MacGraw could play it. And they didn't want to do it, and that's why Steve McQueen dropped out.
Well, the other part, though, is the other thing he offered, though, was giving her like an associate producer credit so she could come and be on set. Because he had just married Ali MacGraw and really didn't want to be apart from her. So he was trying to figure out a way to get her so she could be on set while they were filming. And Friedkin was like, I am not giving Ali MacGraw an associate producer credit. That's the part he regrets. He was like, he should have just given her the credit, let her come, and kept Steve McQueen, but he put his foot down. He's like, I'm not giving her credit for something she's not doing. And that was that. So,
and she, I mean, it could have been like a 31st person to get malaria.
Exactly. And that's the thing too, by the way, they're losing people left and right. People are getting sick. People are getting injured. Because Friedkin's so difficult, people are walking away. They have to use multiple explosives experts because it's not working. I mean, just everything that could go wrong on this set kind of ends up going wrong. He doesn't even find out he has malaria until the movie wraps. They said that you found out at the premiere that he contracted malaria.
Yeah.
So
he lost 50 pounds. He didn't know how that happened.
Yeah, that might have been a clue, but apparently he didn't even know.
I want to touch on a couple things you just said that just kind of give you a few other people he turned to before Roy Scheider for this. And that's Clint Eastwood, Jack Nicholson, Robert Blake, and Robert Mitchum, who was interested, but he said, why do I need to go to South America to fall out of a truck? I can do that at home.
That's so great. Like, I love what that says about Robert Mitchum. It's like, it's true. Yeah. It's such like a old school actor's response to like, why the hell am I going to film on location?
So great. And then you mentioned explosives experts, and there's a scene in Sorcerer where there's a tree that's felled in the road and they need to blow it up. And Friedkin had pyrotechnics guys. Do you know this story?
Tell it. Yeah, I know it.
So they had the pyrotechnics guys on set, couldn't really get it right. So, and this speaks to Friedkin and the company he keeps, made a call to Queens to a guy he knew called Marvin the Flame. This guy torches businesses for the insurance money. So he comes to South America with 2 suitcases labeled beauty products, comes in, blows up the tree, takes off. And that's how they got that explosion. And just to speak to the kind of company Friedkin keeps, the prologue in Queens or in Elizabeth, where Roy Scheider's character is the wheelman, that's kind of his sin, is he's the wheelman for the mob who knock over this church. And it's a mob-tied church.
Right. He's in the Irish mob. They knock over an Italian, a church connected to the Italian mob, and that starts a whole thing.
Right. So there was one of the robbers in this. There was an actual church robbed like blocks away from where they shot this. And he hired one of the robbers of that church to be one of the robbers in this movie because he knew him. He knew the guy who knocked off the church, brought him into this movie to knock off a church on screen. You gotta love Friedkin. That's a big part of why I brought this to the show, just so I could tell stories like that because they're endless and it's pretty amazing. But yeah, I think we've talked about the cast, talked about the story, and we've alluded to production problems, of which there are myriad. But I think, we want to cover just a few more of them because they're endless. Everybody got sick. And if they didn't get sick, they were fired by Friedkin because he was paranoid that they were reporting things back to the studio and getting in the way of his money.
Yeah, he ended up replacing the director of photography because the director of photography was giving him pushback about basically the director of photography admitted that he wished they hadn't gone on location, that they had actually
Right.
filmed it in a studio because then he could have got the light that he wanted. And Friedkin blew a fit at that, so he fired him and then brought in another
Yeah.
guy.
So the story is that he shot all the prologue stuff all around the world. Looks great. And he underdeveloped the first 2 weeks of the jungle shooting because he didn't know how to light it. And the thing was, they had to fly back to LA to process the film and look at dailies. So they had 2 weeks of filming under their belt and went back to LA and realized this. And Friedkin wanted to shoot it all again. And the guy walked away. Well, there was some kind of debate whether the guy walked away or Friedkin canned him. I don't know. But that was Dick Bush was his name. And it kind of works out to his benefit because he brought in John M. Stevens, who worked with Friedkin before on some documentary stuff. That's how Friedkin got his start, was working on basically TV documentaries. And so he met John Stevens working on one of those. And Stevens came in, and thank God he did, because one of the cool things about this is that it looks like a documentary. That's kind of the style Friedkin has.
Yeah, that is true. That ends up being a really good choice.
It really lends itself to the film and what you're watching on screen. So that really worked out. But then there was, the illness. There was just so much concern over money. And I heard a story that early on when they were scouting locations, it took 2 years just to scout locations. And they went to a town, I think it was in Ecuador, which is where they originally planned to shoot. And Friedkin had Universal's money guy with him. And they met the mayor of this town. And the mayor was like very excited about them possibly coming there to shoot the film because it would be kind of a boon to the town. And Friedkin asked, like, is there anything the town needs? And the mayor said, well, we need a new school. So Friedkin was like, hey, I think the guy's name was Lambert. No, that's the editor, whatever the money guy was. He's like, give him $2,000 to build a new school. And this guy from the studio was like, well, we're not even going to shoot here for sure. Why would I? He's like, just do it. It's $2,000. And then the guy opens his suitcase to give this mayor $2,000. And Friedkin sees there's a ton of money in there. And he's like, you know what? Make it 4,000. So he's just giving money to people in Ecuador with no intention of shooting there, just to piss off the studio. And he thought that by doing this, he would get the money guy to get off the set and just leave him alone to make the film. That didn't necessarily work, but it's just one more story of like Friedkin throwing a wrench in the works to his own, detriment.
Right. So the craziest story to me, and it ties into the best scene of the entire movie, is the bridge scene, which everyone talks about, which I had never seen before. And I have to say, you can't say enough about it. It is one of the most engaging scenes I've really ever seen in films. It's harrowing, and you can feel every second of it.
So much tension.
So much tension in that scene. But even that, where they end up building that bridge and there's hydraulics underneath it to kind of hold the truck, where they originally had it, the water recedes too far. So they just decide to pick up the bridge and move to a completely different location, rebuild it to have the water they need. And it's like, at that point, just the level of problems, I can't even imagine doing that. Just deciding, forget it. We're going to take it all down, move it miles down the road and film it somewhere else. I mean, just the expense of that is nuts.
It feels like a cursed set, basically. And yeah, it took them 6 weeks and $1 million to build that bridge. They did it in the Dominican Republic. And like you said, there was a drought and the river dried up. So they moved it all the way to Mexico. And then they built it there and that river dried up. So they had to eventually like create the river, like man-made water, rain overhead. It was all done by them. And yeah, it's just like, what if anything could go wrong, it would. And then they tried to film somewhere else as well in Mexico, or maybe it was where the bridge was. And the local people who I guess had been visited by missionaries, they were very Christian, found out that Friedkin directed The Exorcist, and everybody fled the town because they thought he was like related to the devil. So
I
this
didn't know
guy
that
just,
story.
yeah. So the guy couldn't win. And I think that story of persistence, despite all of his hubris, is what makes this so interesting, because it almost feels like the making of it is reflected on screen with these guys trying to overcome all of these obstacles, and some of them having big egos along the way to get to this ultimate goal. And that like it's kind of symbiotic between the production and the story,
Right.
and it really feels like it should have a Hearts of Darkness or like Burden of Dreams to Fitzcarraldo. We need a documentary
Yeah,
about
I
it.
wish someone was making a documentary about the making of this. But probably the least consequential issue, but the one that makes me laugh is eventually Friedkin and Roy Scheider start kind of butting heads as they're making the
Yeah,
movie. And Friedkin's like, oh, I think he was becoming difficult because he'd had success with Jaws. And it's like,
yeah.
do you think maybe it was because he had malaria and you stranded him in the jungle for like 2 years and you're trying to like, I have to admit, I would have gotten chippy about midway through the filming of Sorcerer. Schreider's doing his own driving. He's in the middle of nowhere. The conditions are brutal. They're moving bridges. Maybe that was why Schreider was a bit chippy. You know,
Yeah.
who knows?
Well, the first scene they show of Scheider in the town is just like sweaty knuckles, and he's in bed just dying. And you have to wonder if they just didn't film him dealing with malaria at some point to get
Right.
that shot, because it seems like what he went through the whole time. But uh, he was in and nominated for Best Supporting Actor, French Connection with Hackman. So they had a relationship, and Scheider really wanted to play Father Karras in The Exorcist, but William Peter Blatty didn't like him. And I guess Scheider at that point didn't have the ability to say, well, I want him, which is surprising because it's William Friedkin. So why wouldn't he stand up to William Peter Blatty? But nonetheless, Scheider seemed to have sort of a problem because of that with Friedkin. Worked out to his benefit because he did Jaws instead, which sort of put his star on the rise. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe if he did develop a bit of an ego from Jaws, like two egos on set aren't going to work. So, there's no room for him with Friedkin having the ego he has.
No one can have a bigger ego than Friedman on set. That's definitely not allowed.
Um, yeah. So, what else do you want to talk about with this? Tangerine Dream. The score is such a critical part of this, I think, and Friedkin came across them. They're very ahead of their time with
Right.
the kind of synth pop music.
I was going to say, it's important to remember the Tangerine Dream ends up becoming a go-to group for scores of movies in the 80s. It's just this very electronic kind of pulsing sound. And Friedkin, should be credited with kind of discovering them.
Yeah.
I mean, he sees them, he hears their work and just becomes enamored by it and brings them in to do the movie. So it's, another way that Friedkin's kind of ahead of his time.
This was their first film, and he saw them playing in an abandoned church in Germany, which feels very Friedkin too, and asked them to come on board, and they said yes. They only worked from the script. They didn't have any footage of the film. He met with them. Now, this is a German band in 1977. He met with them, and he said, this is a dark film. It's very cynical. I want you to get into the head of Hitler while you're thinking about making this score. And yeah. And by the way, on one of the supplemental materials on the Criterion 4K is there's a documentary called Friedkin Uncut. Did you watch that?
I did.
Okay. So the first thing he talks about on there is the two most important people are Hitler and Jesus. So he kind of has a Hitler thing, I think.
Yeah, I watched that and just thought I could see now why Friedkin bugs so many people. Like it's like that's what you want the opening scene of a documentary to be like. Oh boy.
Yeah. So the scene starts, and he comes in, gets out of his car. The documentary crew is already there. He sees the guy who's interviewing him. And the first thing he says is like, "What's up, motherfucker?" And then he talks about Hitler and Jesus. So that's, you're really getting a taste of who he is right from the jump there. But anyway, got Tangerine Dream on board. He was filming in the DR, and the lead of Tangerine Dream sent him reel to reel tapes of the score that they had made, but he had no way to play them. So this is another bump in the road. He had to send them to Mexico via courier to have them put onto a format he could listen to in the jungle, brought back. That's like
Wow.
2 weeks and thousands of dollars just to hear the score. So anything that could go wrong with this film did. And it all like kind of works out in the end, because on screen, I think it's like a masterpiece.
Yeah, look, I mean, regardless of what you think about the bloated budget and everything else, you do see it on the screen. I mean, the set pieces of the explosion of the oil rig, the tree explosion, that bridge scene. I mean, those are, they're kind of astounding scenes.
Yeah.
If you love film, you can't not be enamored with seeing that. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you can't deny Friedkin's talent and his eye. You could argue about a lot of other things about him, but you cannot argue with that.
I think, I would love to do some more Friedkin films on the podcast, just because I want to talk about him all day. Like, you should really read his autobiography, The Friedkin Connection, because it's nuts. And this is like, just one more thing, that he met with Sid Sheinberg and Barry Diller, he and Wallen Green, the writer, and they had to pitch this to them. They're, the guys at Universal, and they had a lunch to pitch this. And he instructed Wallen Green to look to the side of their eyes to throw them off, so that he wouldn't be looking directly at either of them, and it would be very uncomfortable. And then he proceeded to drink like a pint of vodka and fall off of his chair just to mess with these guys. So that tells you, like, there are stories like that throughout this book that like endless. So it's a lot of fun. I highly recommend reading it.
So something else I wanted to mention, though, after it comes out in America and clearly doesn't do very well. So when it's put out in Europe, they actually not only change the name, it's actually released as Wages of Fear in Europe, which is basically them admitting it's straight up remake to try to get people to go see it. But they also make the change to recut it, and remove the opening 30 minutes and start in the same place as Wages of Fear, but use flashbacks to kind of show how they got there. And I have to admit, Friedkin was furious about this, but I do wonder, I wonder if that change would have helped the movie if you would have started it there and started with people speaking English in a way, and use the background stories of how they got there almost in flashback as you saw each of these characters. Like, I wonder if that would have been a better choice. I don't know for sure, because I like the movie as it is. I mean, we're 30 years, 40 years down the road, we're more accustomed to this kind of stuff. It doesn't bother us. I mean, it's fine. I did find the opening sequence is a little abrupt, a little convoluted. Trying to, part of me, the first time I watched it, had a hard time understanding the French story. Like, were they embezzling money? Like, I was trying to figure out exactly what the hell was going on there, because that was a bit hard to catch the first time I watched it. And of course, the assassin is, I'd say the way the assassin guy is handled is pretty convoluted. He shows up briefly at the very beginning of the movie, and then how he ends up getting roped into driving is it's a bit, that's a bit confusing. Again, I'm not going to lie, it still confuses me a little bit, but it's not that it's really, really difficult to follow. But I do wonder if changing the order of how this is presented to you might have made it more palatable to more people.
That's a good question. From what I understand, they wanted to splice that stuff in close to the end, almost as like looking back on their sins in a way as they approach the end of whether they're going to, meet their goal or suffer some fate. And to me, that seems fairly far into the film to establish that.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if that would be a good idea, but I could certainly see it happening early on while they're just in the town before, everything gets enrolling. Um, I think Friedkin was mainly pissed about that because he had Final Cut, but he only had Final Cut in America. I don't know if he didn't think about it being overseas, but yeah, that I can
I
imagine.
can
Like,
understand that. And the thing
oh,
is,
that must have went him up.
nowadays, I have no doubt in my mind that if someone tried to tackle this project now, it would be an 8-part series.
Yeah.
That no one would even attempt to put this in movie form, which again just shows
Right.
how ambitious things were at the time. And, you're willing to try to bring all this into a narrative movie and get it done. Nowadays they spend a full hour on each of these people, give you the whole stories.
Yeah.
It'll go on forever. There's no doubt that's how it will be handled.
That works in The Bear. I mean,
That's fair.
every character gets an episode, but yeah, like episodes 3 through 6 would be each person. Yeah, we don't need that. I think, I think Friedkin did it brilliantly. Like, I would be curious to see a cut where that stuff was, spliced throughout. But Billy loved a prologue, and he did it very well here, I think. And uh, this movie didn't make money, but
No.
it's had a real resurgence. And a big part of that is that Paramount and Universal washed their hands of it when it bombed. They didn't want to deal with any of the home video aspects of it. They put out a DVD, or not a DVD. They put out a laser disc, which is kind of weird in 1990, but they did a laser disc and a VHS edition that was just a really bad quality pan and scan version of it. So they put no effort into it. It's almost like the way we talk about
I
the
rented
AI stuff.
multiple DVDs of this movie, actually, and that's the first one I got, the pan and scan one, which I just tossed aside immediately. Like, nothing I dislike more than pan and scan, except Halloween in pan and scan. But we'll talk about that another time. Like, if we ever get into like pan and scan versions, that's the only good pan and scan that exists. But continue.
Yeah. So they really just kind of like did the minimum with it. And then I think it was it was around 2013. Well, no, sorry. Like later in the 90s, I believe they put out the DVD of it, and the one you saw, and it was the same thing. So it was just really terrible. And then I think it was 2013, Friedkin sued for the rights because he wanted it to be what he wanted it to be. And he was backed by Warner Brothers, who committed to putting it out on home video, streaming, whatever. So he kind of had a backing with it, and he won his case, and he was able to just sit down and tinker with it like he was known to do, and put out this Blu-ray edition that you watched, like I said, in 2013. And that really just launched the film again. Along with it came a few prints. And so there are a lot of revival screenings of it because that initial Blu-ray launch sort of put it on people's radar. And then, the film bros really sort of latched onto it.
Yeah.
And
what I've discovered too from looking at this is that it is a director's movie. Like,
absolutely,
tons of modern directors now. I mean, Tarantino obviously talks about it a lot, with Josh Safdie. I mean, and there's just a lot of current directors who love Sorcerer.
Nolan loves it. This is Stephen King's favorite film of all time, which I find fascinating.
Maybe Sorcerer is the reason he wanted to direct Maximum Overdrive, so he can blame Friedkin for that. Maybe that's how that came about. It's like, I want to make a truck movie.
Really interesting. Wow. By the way, go listen to our Maximum Overdrive episode because we had a lot of fun talking about that. But yeah, so this has sort of become a lost film that's been found recently.
So what I wanted to say too in regards to this, and I think it's important to understand as well, that almost every movie that we now consider classic was pretty much a flop when it came out as well. It's taken these movies decades to be considered classics. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life was a huge failure. Citizen Kane was a
Wizard of
huge
Oz.
failure. The Wizard of Oz wasn't that successful. Vertigo was considered one of Hitchcock's worst movies. I mean, these are all movies now in like the top 10 of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah.
And it's very important to understand that when a director is just a little bit ahead of their time or making the right movie in the wrong period of time, it can just disappear. And the way it's seen through the lens of whatever the culture is in that moment is terrible. But it could take decades for someone to find it. And that's kind of the same thing here with Sorcerer, where, people who are making movies now understand that so many things they're doing are influenced by a movie like Sorcerer.
And I think that's why there's such a love for it now is there's this convergence of it being rediscovered and now the physical media aspect of it, because the people who love Sorcerer now are probably the people who bought this 4K of it. And there's still a lot of people who don't know about it. But I heard this video of Bill Burr talking about it, saying he had never heard of it, went to see it at the Arrow in LA and was like blown away. And there's so many testimonials like that from people who had never heard of it. And once they watch it, it's like, holy moly, this is an amazing film.
I mean,
I would say it's in my top 10 films.
It's such a tough guy movie too. It's just like, you could see like you're wanting to sit down with it. Someone compared it to what was it, like the Treasure of Sierra Madre.
Yeah,
I think it's a really great comparison, and especially Roy Scheider is giving off like Humphrey Bogart vibes. I agree with that completely. Yeah. And that's the thing, that kind of movie too, Treasure of Sierra Madre, is just like it's just a guy movie, like it just is, and it has that feel to it as well.
This is a guy movie because there's a montage, almost A-Team style, of them building trucks that I really loved watching. Absolutely. And then after that, you have a montage of them driving the trucks to prove they can do it. And one guy is like a maniac. Another guy is like so precise with it. So you're establishing these characters almost like the A-Team. It's so maybe the A-Team is influenced by Sorcerer. I don't know, but I watched it with Laura this morning and she's like, this isn't a film for me. And I was like, I don't think there's a woman in this film.
No, absolutely. That's why they didn't want to flesh out the Ally McGraw character. Like, look, women get 2 minutes of screen time. That's it. Like, that's all we're doing here.
The only woman I remember in this film is the woman who's getting married at the church they knock off at the beginning, and she has a black eye.
I wanted to mention that. What the hell is that? I was thinking the same thing.
Man, Friedkin, what a cynic. The realism of the 70s, man.
Oh, geez.
Pretty amazing. Yeah. I could talk about this film all day, but I want to be mindful because we're already an hour and a half. Do you have anything else you wanted to bring up about it?
Yeah, I don't feel like we can go down any more rabbit holes of discussing Sorcerer. So we'll leave it there.
Okay. I highly recommend it. If you're not a physical media collector, seek it out on streaming or whatever. But if you are a physical media collector,
you can seek it out on streaming. I mean, it's certainly not free anywhere. Again, I looked this up.
Right.
It will cost you $4 to rent it. You're better off getting the DVD. You're better off getting the good transfer and trying to find it that way.
That's true. I mean, spend the $4.
It's physical media month. Go to your local library. Get the DVD. You watch it.
Go. But yeah, that's it. 5 stars for me on Sorcerer. So check it out. And with that, let's get into what we've watched recently.
Yeah, so what I've been watching recently. So here's one for you. I told you I've been watching like bad 80s movies with my kids. Strange Brew was on Hulu. It kind of popped up on my feed. And so I watched that. Now, I guarantee like most people have no idea what the hell Strange Brew was. It requires like a full explanation. Back in the 70s, there was SCTV, which was the Canadian version of Saturday Night Live. Bob and Doug McKenzie, Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas. They were these, 2 Canadian guys who love beer. They get their own movie in 1982. I don't even know how that happened. And I remember loving it as a kid. I mean, any movie that involves a guy drinking an entire vat of beer and then using it to pee out a fire,
Yeah.
What 8-year-old is not going to love that movie? So I decided to watch it with my kids. I don't think they appreciated it quite as much as I did when I was a kid, but they didn't hate it. It's important to say, did not hate it.
Does it
So
hold up for
that's
you?
something.
Does it hold up for you? As
It
best it
holds
can,
up.
I guess.
I mean, it holds up as well as it can. It is a dumb movie, but
Yeah.
it wasn't terrible, and it's not too long. It's only like an hour and 25 minutes, and it's really important that if you're going to be a stupid movie that you don't overstay your welcome. So I was fine with it.
If younger people are listening and they don't know what SCTV is, the talent that came out of there, you had John Candy, who they may not know if they're that young, but big actor in the 80s, just like one of the best actors for my money. Joe Flaherty, Rick Moranis, another big actor in the 80s, kind of making his comeback now with Spaceballs too.
Yeah.
Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy. Like, it was a murderer's row of talent, comedic talent. And, without that, I don't know what the landscape of American film and TV would look like.
Sure.
I mean, Schitt's Creek alone is like, well, I guess that's a Canadian production, but you have Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara. It's just really amazing, the things that came out of SCTV.
Yeah. So the other thing, a side note, my wife has been clamoring to watch Stand By Me. And I'm like, I was iffy about it the whole time. Like, I don't really think, I'm not sure this is appropriate for like 10-year-old. And I finally gave in. And that was a huge mistake.
Oh,
I have to say, like, I actually don't even, maybe I'm in a minority. I don't even love Stand By Me. I think it's okay. It's fine.
I agree.
But what I discovered when I rewatched it, especially with my kid, is that it's pretty inappropriate for a 10-year-old. Like,
Yeah.
the language is like not working for me. And what I realized is that you get confused because kids are in the movie, but it is not a movie for kids. Basically, what the movie is for is it's for baby boomers who want to remember being kids. Like, that's what the movie is, and that's what it's for. So
Right.
that people who are older now can watch a movie about their nostalgic childhoods in a way. And so there's no connection to anybody now to watch it or to kind of like get something out of it. Like I said, I barely got something out of it back in the day for me. And so it's like for a kid now, I just think there's nothing really to it. So it didn't sit well with me on rewatch. Just felt like it wasn't necessary to watch again.
Okay. Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot because Crooklyn reminded me of it just a little bit. And so I've been thinking about it, but I don't know if I'll revisit it. As we've established, I'm not huge on King, so I don't know if it's worth my time. But did you watch anything else that you want to mention?
Nothing worth mentioning.
Okay, it's been 2 weeks, so I watched a lot of bad things this week that I won't talk about.
I watched bad things too, so I'm not going to bother mentioning them.
Deal with grief. But I will mention one of the things I did watch. I don't have to talk about it, but I started watching Bosch, and I really like it. It's been around forever, but I really dig Titus Welliver and Bosch, even though it's not kind of normal fare that I would watch. I am having a lot of fun with it.
We were huge Bosch fans in this house. We loved it. So, and we're actually going to watch, there's a spinoff now, another spinoff of Bosch.
Ballard,
Ballard, I think we're going to start watching.
So the big things I went to the movies to see: Fantastic Four, First Steps.
I did see that. We haven't talked about that. Fantastic Four. I saw it too.
What did you think of it?
So I have to preface this by saying I was never a huge Fantastic Four fan when I was a kid. Like, I read a lot of comics and I was never huge on the Fantastic Four. I'm not big on superhero movies about space. It's never been my jam.
Same.
Like, so I'll preface it by saying that I've never loved like intergalactic battles. Never loved the Silver Surfer. So maybe I'm the worst person for this, but I thought it was a little boring, to be honest. And especially coming off of Superman, it was a little dull for me. I didn't love it. I thought it was fine. But I'll go so far as to say I enjoyed the Thunderbolts more than Fantastic Four.
Well, I don't think you're alone. I mean, the box office for it is not spectacular. I mean, it'll make its money back, but barely. And I think that, Marvel, it's an uphill battle for them. This was supposed to be the one that like they didn't tie it to anything else. It was sort of its own story, and Pedro Pascal's in it, and it was supposed to be the thing that put them back on the map, and it just doesn't seem like it's doing that. And I think the fatigue is real. I mean, the overseas numbers in particular are incredibly low. And that tells me that the international appeal isn't there. It's dying in America. I think it's just done.
I was talking to someone about this recently, and this is what I realized. This is almost the problem with success. So when Marvel first comes out, you have no expectations, and your bar is low. So Iron Man comes out, Thor comes out. Like, people aren't expecting too much, and they're pleasantly surprised by this. And the arc just keeps getting higher, right? And each movie is more successful than the next, and you're building, and you reach this apex, which is the last two Avengers movies with Endgame, and you're just at this apex. But you've now basically ended that run, and you have to reshuffle the deck, and you're essentially starting over, right? You're rebuilding a team, you're bringing in new people, you're basically starting from the beginning. But the problem is, your expectations are no longer at the beginning. You're at the apex. And so you're expected to reboot a world while continuing to have the same success that you had over 22 movies that you built slowly.
And
that alone is a recipe. I'm sorry, what?
Well, you're supposed to do it with lesser characters.
That's like what I'm saying. So you're rebooting, cards. You're trying to get people invested in an entirely new group of people, but the expectations have been built to now continue to succeed in a way that you did with Endgame, which you had built over the course of over a decade. I think you're set up to fail. It's almost impossible to succeed in that environment. So I don't really know where you go from there. It's like you're a victim of your own success. I don't really see how anyone can expect these movies to perform as those were, because we were invested in those characters. We have to get reinvested, and they have to drop the budgets, drop the expectations, and almost start from scratch.
It seems so desperate that they brought Robert Downey Jr. back.
Right.
And it definitely seems desperate that they brought the Russos back for so much money.
Yeah. Now you get into the gimmick things. And I have to say, the thing that most annoyed me about casting Robert Downey Jr., and we even saw this at the end of Fantastic Four. What do you see? You see his back, but you see the mask because he's holding it.
Did he ever take his mask off?
I saw maybe I missaw it, but I thought.
No, did Dr. Doom in the comics ever take his mask
off?
No,
so that's the point I'm trying to make. I don't remember ever seeing Dr. Doom without his mask, because they cast Robert Downey Jr. He's going to spend this entire time now maskless, and I'm going to be furious. So it's like, even that, it's like, why?
It's desperate. I think they're on their way out, and unless they can lower the budgets, lower the expectations, it's stuck. I thought Fantastic Four was not good. I thought the script was kind of garbage, and I thought Pedro Pascal was incredibly underused. I mean, this guy is like, I had going into it the expectation of like, ooh, we see Pedro Pascal for 20 minutes in every movie, and now he's going to have to carry a film. How's he going to do? But he didn't have to carry this film. I mean, he did almost nothing the whole time. And it's just like, it was a dud for me. I love Fantastic Four. I especially love Silver Surfer.
Oh, wow.
I thought Julia Garner was excellent. But Galactus was super boring. Like, intergalactic villains are just dull to me if they're a giant, like, he's like Thanos. He's the same thing, except Josh Brolin brought, so much charisma to it. And he was like almost human size, but this is like a giant monster.
Yeah, world-devouring villains have always bored me. I said, even when I was a kid reading the comics, like, that just turned me up cold. I like my crime fighting on the streets.
Yeah,
that's always how I've been.
I agree. So yeah, that was kind of a dud for me. What else did I see? I saw Together.
Oh, film. Yeah, I think you talked about that last week.
We didn't meet last week.
2 weeks ago, because you saw a preview of it.
No, I just saw it last week on Thursday.
Oh, what the hell were you talking about? Doesn't matter. Go ahead.
This is the Alison Brie, Dave Franco movie.
Right.
And I like the idea of it. and I thought it was pretty well made. It's about two people in kind of a struggling relationship who are really growing apart. And then there's a lot of cult activity in movies lately, which I'm here for because I love cults. And they stumble upon a cult that has this magic water that creates like a symbiotic thing between people. And so, this isn't spoiling anything. If you've seen a trailer for it, they come together as a couple, like literally. They just are magnetic and just can't stay apart from one another. I won't get too far into it, but that's the premise. And it was okay. This was a big hit out of Sundance. Neon bought it for a lot of money, and I was looking forward to it. And I appreciate films like this. Have a bit of an allergy to Dave Franco. He's a little much for me sometimes.
Whoa!
Which is
this is a Dave Franco family over here, so careful.
Okay, well, in this, he's just like a sad boy. So a lot of the like scene chewing that he does in most movies, it's the opposite here. He's just like at 2 on the volume level. Alison Brie is fantastic, and I think they have a lot of great chemistry because they're like
I would hope so
in real life. Yeah. So I thought the last scene could have been cut completely for a better ending. That was the main thing that did me in with it. But overall, it was an interesting film that we need more of, things like this. Last thing I saw yesterday, I went to see Weapons, the new film from Zach Kreger, the follow-up to Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
Holy shit, I love this movie. And it's not because he said his main inspiration for it was Magnolia, the Paul Thomas Anderson film, which is my number one. But it was so well made. It was such an incredible story of a town that struggles to understand how 17 out of the 18 kids in this one classroom disappear. And it shows it from different perspectives. Josh Brolin's in it. He actually replaced Pedro Pascal, who was going to be in it. Like another film with this guy. Thank God he's not in it. No shade on Pedro Pascal. I like him, but enough. But Josh Brolin, Julia Garner, Benedict Wong, an incredible turn by Amy Madigan of all people. She is absolutely sensational in this film. But it's all the different perspectives of people trying to understand what happened to these children. And it's so good. It even goes as far to be like Magnolia as Alden Ehrenreich is in it, who was in Oppenheimer and a lot of other things recently. He plays this sad sack cop the way John C. Reilly does in Magnolia. So there's almost like a 1-for-1 between these two, which I think is like this beautiful tribute to Magnolia. So great soundtrack. It's 2 hours, and I didn't feel like it should have been an hour 45 or anything. It's just a lot of fun. And I saw that it already made $5 million in previews. It has like a $38 million budget. So I really think this is going to be, I'm not going to say it's the next Sinners, but I think it's going to be the thing that's kind of an unexpected success for this year, the way Sinners was early in the year.
Interesting.
Because it's just really, really good. I'm going to go see it again.
I was iffy on checking it out. So I'm going to check it out now.
It's not like, I know you're kind of averse to horror, and there's a little bit of horror in it, and it's kind of gruesome once or twice, but it's mostly just kind of a suspense story. And like the different perspectives really change up how you see all the different scenes. So I highly recommend it. I think it's in my top 3 films of the year for sure. So definitely bearish on Weapons. All right. Well, that's it for another episode. We're going to come back next week. Mike, you brought a film to the show that we're going to talk about because of its physical media presence. We're going to talk about Memento. So very excited about that. I went out and bought a brand new edition of it so I could see it in the same way you are. And it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Yeah, so join us next week when we talk about Memento. We will see you then. So long.